This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their job using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Speaking of listeners, if you are listening to this podcast, I guarantee this is a topic you are going to want to listen to.
Absolutely. So what topic are we going to be talking about today?
The best of launching a rocket.
Sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The best of launching rockets. Oh,
Yes.
I think we've probably had a lot of people on the show that could talk about this topic, right, Jeff?
We have.
So, who are you going to hear from in these clips? We have episode 171, How Do You Get Ready for a Launch with Natalie Quintero. Episode 152, How Do You Move a Rocket with Dan Zapata. And finally, episode 185 with What's It Like to Blast Off in a Rocket with astronaut Nicole Stott. These are going to be great clips to listen to. We hope you enjoy them.
How do you get a rocket ready to launch?
How do you get a rocket ready for launch?
Yes.
Ooh, I think this is a topic we haven't yet covered, but we are going to learn so much about. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the wonderful Natalie Quintero, and she currently works for Boeing on their SLS program as the Core Stage Launch Operations Lead.
Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Well, we are super excited to have you here. This is going to be such a fun discussion. But I like to ask for our young listeners out there, did you always know that you wanted to work with rockets even when you were a kid?
Actually, no.
Okay.
We get that a lot, actually. So what did you want to do?
So when I was a little kid, I first wanted to be a pilot, actually. I had the opportunity that my dad was a pilot himself. So I had that role model in my life early in my,
Right.
And I remember asking for Christmas one day, the Barbie pilot.
Yep,
okay.
I remember her.
Back then in the late 90s. And now with the Barbie movie coming up, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I remember having that and wishing to be a pilot, and flying was one of the first things that I thought I was going to do. But later in high school, and I did my high school in Venezuela, actually. I came to the U.S. to go to college.
Okay.
Had, maybe what did I like? I really like science, chemistry, physics, math classes.
Right.
I really took one design class and a drafting that kind of opened my eyes to what engineering could be.
Wow.
So I started looking into, okay, maybe engineering could be an option. My mom is an industrial engineer, but she stopped working when I was born. So I never really saw her in the engineering role, the mother role. She worked 10 years in the industry before she had me. So I really never saw an engineer really close to me or my surroundings to say, okay, yeah, this is what an engineer does. So is there something that combines aviation with engineering? And I ended up discovering something called aerospace engineering. So I started researching about that, and in Venezuela, they don't have that major in any of the universities that are there. So I started looking outside, maybe Europe or the US, and I stumbled upon Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Okay.
Yes.
Very known for aviation in general, but also
Absolutely.
for engineering. And I was like, okay, I paid a visit to the campus one before, it was my senior year. And I was like, okay, this is where I want to go. And I went to the Daytona Beach campus. They have two campuses, one in Prescott, Arizona, and one here in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I loved it. Like I loved the campus, the people, the fact that everybody was like so aviation space oriented.
Right.
I did start at college when the shuttle program ended, so I never got to see a shuttle
launch.
I did in my life, really.
Yeah.
But going to campus and just being surrounded about that, it really opened my eyes into not just aviation, which is what I was familiar with, like airplanes, like from having an airport by like the international airport in Caracas, but seeing like, a space. And I remember seeing one of the first launches, rocket launches, was a night launch. It was when SpaceX was doing their Dragon demo.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
And then I saw ULA launch and I was like, wow, interesting. And then I would always go to Kennedy Space Center, to visit and to geek about it.
Yeah.
And life led me to Kennedy Space Center actually to do, real work with the plus program. So that's kind of like how I ended up working on rockets. But like life has its mysteries to work around it. So
wow. I love how you
fun.
just put that life has its mysteries in figuring that out. One thing you mentioned that I have never heard before, I've heard lots of folks say, and especially on the podcast, that they come to engineering not in a direct route. Something else kind of happens. I have never heard anybody sort of come to it through a drafting class. Mm-hmm. Was there something that happened in that drafting class? Was there a project you were working on that you were designing something that sort of led you towards engineering?
Yeah. So in the drafting class, we had to do kind of like schematics of like, it was houses. The class had, and I was like, it was more like architecture if you think about it a little bit.
All right.
But I was like, that's cool, kind of designing in this case, the layout of what a house could be. And then what is like, the materials that it needs to be. And I was like, okay, you can play a role into design, even though I don't do design engineering as my current role, I do operations. But I think in general, though, even in whatever phase you might be in an engineering project, having that creativity, I think it pains out, through other disciplines within the engineering world. And engineering is really big. You go into studying aerospace engineering, you can be doing millions of things.
Yep.
Yes.
My classmates, we all did the same classes and we all do different things. Like
right.
Keep in touch. So I think, and that's one of the values of like doing internships too for students when they get to that point. And I actually have learned that some high school students even have internships now, like NASA has that opportunity.
Wow.
Companies do that as well. And that's awesome because that is really how you engage and see, look what I can do. Or maybe I didn't know that, because you can touch everything in a classroom.
Right.
You're doing a degree. It's impossible. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. My son is a material science engineer, but there's so many different ways that he can take that. Same thing as you were saying. So now you work for Boeing, which is really cool. And you get to work on the SLS. So tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Right. So I've been working with the SLS program over now 8 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about because I started with Boeing as an intern in their Boeing Commercial Airplanes division up in Everett, Washington.
Wow.
And I made my transition into space on the last summer before graduating college. One of the reasons I wanted to work is obviously, space looks cool. I did actually a project with Johnson Space Center as a student on the Vomit Comet.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah. They had a whole program for like college students called the Reduced Microgravity Flight Program. And basically universities across the country would compete to get their experiments to fly on board the Vomit Comet. I did that in 2014 with a joint team between Duke University and Embry-Riddle.
Wow.
And I think that was the first time where I was like, wow, this feels like I'm an astronaut and I'm so cool to work in space. Because when we went on the flight and the airplane did parabolas and you're literally floating for like a couple seconds, obviously, but it just feels surreal because you feel like you're in a pool, but there's no water sustaining you up in the air. Your body's trying to figure out what is happening. And I remember the first parabola, all the students were so excited about, just the feeling. And then it was like, okay, everybody get to your experiments. We do.
You can't just fly around. So I do have to ask,
joy, right?
Did you throw up on this and get sick, or were you one of those lucky people? Oh my gosh.
All right.
So good for you.
Nice.
Yeah, they did 4 flights, and my flight with the people we were did not vomit, but the other ones, at least 1 or 2 people did. Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Well,
But
it does get the name, right? The vomit comes.
exactly. But what a really unique experience that had to be.
Yes. And that actually was the one that I was like, wow, like it would be really cool to work in space. And so as I was interning, I did 2 internships in Boeing commercial airplanes. And I was looking to see, well, what other opportunities are there for space? Well, Boeing has a big portfolio in space, not just rocket, but we do satellites. We have Starliner, other projects.
Right.
We are involved. And at the time, I was looking to go to California because that's where our satellite development center is at. But there was no opportunities at the time. So life led me to SLS, really. Opportunities through networking, really. And also, I didn't want to live in the north because I'm from South America. So it would have been really nice to stay in the lower part of the country. And so, I got the opportunity to go work in the SLS program on my last internship before graduating college in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center. And I've been there ever since.
Wow.
My career has been working on Artemis 1, which we launched last year.
Yes. Yay.
Yeah, and now I'm working on Artemis 2, which is going to be the first, manned mission, and I'm super excited about that.
How do you move a rocket?
How do you move a rocket? So believe it or not, this episode for me is so exciting because I remember learning all about this as a kid. So who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today is the incredible Dan Zapata. He is a crawler systems engineer at Jacobs, working at Kennedy Space Center.
Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Jeffrey. It's great to be here. Great to be on the show with you guys.
We are so excited to have you. We're going to talk about there's so much about the space program that is amazing, but I love learning about the crawler. And I told this story before, but I'm going to tell it on air. So the very first time I came to Kennedy Space Center with my parents back in 1980, yes, kids, do the math. My mom was so excited when we took the tour in the back and there was the crawler. My mom was like, do you know that? And she starts listing all of what it does, how fast it goes and what it carries.
That's what I was talking about.
I was like, I didn't realize my mom was such a space geek. But my question to you, Dan, is since that was my childhood experience, did you have a childhood experience with space that kind of made you want to go into this and be the one who kind of drives the crawler?
So, a funny story. Your parents taking you to KSC. My parents actually took me to KSC. Unfortunately, I was very young. I was probably 2, 3 years old, so I don't remember it exactly. In terms of, did I ever want to be part of the space program? Actually, not really. It was never really something I sought after. Ever since I was a very young kid, I was very interested in math and science.
Okay.
I knew
engineering
was going to be what I wanted my career to be.
Okay.
So I was always very curious. I took things apart. I put things together. I made little raceways using cardboard paper. I got cardboard boxes. And
nice.
My parents would get a little upset because how messy things got. I built a lot of Connects, Legos, a lot of those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So while you were in school, were you expecting to grow up to be the guy that builds something really big and cool? Like that type of engineer?
I'm not sure if I wanted to actually build something, but I definitely wanted to be part of the design of a piece of equipment. I think at a young age, that's what I was looking to do.
Well, that's kind of what you do. So were you one of the ones with the Legos where you didn't always follow the directions and you kind of built your own Lego stuff?
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. You were designing even at a young age. That's awesome.
Yep. Okay, so we can't waste a whole lot of time. We have to talk. Can you tell us what your current job title is and what exactly that means?
Right.
So I am a systems engineer for the Crawler Transporter Group.
Wow.
Specifically electrical systems. My degree is in electrical engineering. And I work for Jacobs, which is the prime contractor for the exploration ground systems here in NASA. And in layman's terms, that means we receive a lot of the flight hardware, and our job is to integrate the flight hardware, put it all together, and have it ready to go out for launch. What my group does specifically is we transport articles of flight hardware, if it's booster segments, if it's the Orion capsule that will have astronauts in it, or if it's the entire assembly, which is the center of the rocket, the booster segments on the sides, the Orion capsule on top. That all sits on top of what's called a mobile launcher.
Right.
And the mobile launcher is moved by the crawler transporter number 2, which has been modified to sustain the extra weight.
Yeah, of all of Artemis. So are you the one that drives the crawler?
So occasionally, yes, I do drive the crawler.
Oh my God.
What is that like? So of course, Jeff and I are all excited, but for our listeners, can you tell us like how fast does this go? Right?
So yeah, the crawler is called a crawler for a reason. It's not it tops out at roughly 1 mile an hour. It's its top speed.
Okay.
And of course, you have to go slower for turns, for going over roadways or the crawler itself can vary in speed, anywhere between 0.01 miles an hour to 1 mile an hour, depending on what we're doing. And driving the crawler is, I know you guys ever had a building and just try to put a steering wheel on it.
That's a great analogy.
It's 131 feet long. It's 114 feet wide, and it varies in height between 20 and 26 feet. So it really is like you're moving the whole entire facility. And it's so big that the driver alone can't do it themselves. They have people on the ground as observers.
Right.
And they're watching the crawler, your blind spots. Your blind spots are huge,
Sure.
I would think, yeah. I drive a minivan and I know that I have little tiny blind spots. I can imagine what you have on a crawler.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So during the first launch attempt for Artemis, I was lucky enough to get a tour and my group went right up next to the crawler. So I was able to get super close to it. We were able to touch it, take pictures of it, but we weren't able to get on it. So one question I still have, is it a cockpit? Does it look like the inside of a car? When you get into drive, is it a steering wheel? Is it more like flight controls? What's happening in there?
So there are a few different compartments on the crawler, and to get on top of the crawler, you walk up what's called a catwalk.
Okay.
And the catwalk circumvents the whole outside of the chassis.
Wow.
Okay.
Through the catwalk, you have access to different rooms. You have the engine rooms, which hold, your big Alco and Cummins engines. You have pump sets that move fluids around. Another room is the control room, which is kind of the brains of the operation.
Right.
Okay.
Not to mention the hardware brains, but also the engineering people are sit there, including myself at times.
Okay.
And they have test conductor who we call GBCT, who runs the whole operation, tells their mechanics or electricians when they have goes to start different equipment. And then on each corner, caddy corner, so one end will have one cab, the other end on the opposite side will have another cab. And the cab is similar on the outside to, I guess, not so much an airplane, but like a boat.
Okay.
Kind of, The exterior is like a boat. And the wheel is very small. The wheel is more or less the size of a golf cart. It's
wow.
6-8 inches in diameter. It's very small. So, but because it's so small, it's not intended like your car would be. Like when you turn on your car, it happens right away.
Right.
On the crawler, when you turn the wheel, it sends commands to the computer system that interprets those commands and turns what's called the trucks on the ground.
Right.
And that turns the crawler itself. So there's a bit of a delay when you do any type of steering.
Okay.
So how much weight can the crawler handle? Because this is the same crawler that also took space shuttles out, correct?
Yeah, it took space shuttles. It took Saturn V rockets. It's taken pretty much any major large rocket from the Saturn V Apollo era through shuttle and now through the Artemis program.
Wow.
And I'd like to note there are actually two crawlers. We have crawler transporter 1 and crawler transporter number 2. And in the last 7 or 8 years, there was a big modifications done on crawler transporter 2 to upgrade its load carrying capacity from approximately 12.5 million pounds when it was houses load weight and shuttle to about 18.5 million pounds for the Artemis program.
Whoa.
So, wow. 18.5
million pounds. Yeah.
I mean, that is literally like driving a huge building.
Oh yeah, the mobile launcher itself has a very tall tower, over 300 feet. Not to mention the rocket that sits next to the tower. So we are moving a building.
Wow.
Rocket.
So to hold 18.5 million pounds, how heavy is the crawler itself?
So the crawler itself, it's lost some weight, but it's also gained a lot more. The crawler itself is around 6.6 million pounds right now.
What is it like to blast off in a rocket ship?
Sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's it like to blast off in a rocket? I think we have a pretty amazing guest for our listeners today, Jeff, don't we? Who is she?
I do agree. If you are not already a fan, after this episode, you will be. Today we have the one and only astronaut Nicole Stott, artist, author, aquanaut, and former NASA astronaut with more than 100 days in space.
Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thank you. I need you guys to introduce me all the time.
Welcome to King Supers. This is...
Yeah. You've done some amazing, amazing things. And, you know, we always like to start out, since we have some young listeners, when you were a kid, did you always want to go to space?
You know, I think I did, but I didn't think about it like it was something that was real, right? I mean, real, like that could be real for me, right?
Right.
I mean, I know, you guys probably can't believe that I'm old enough to have watched that first moon landing, but I did. And I have vivid memory, in front of the black and white TV with my family eating a grilled cheese sandwich or something, watching this go on. And I think even at 6 or 7, you realize that, holy moly, people walking on the moon is pretty extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it was exciting for me and all of that. And I thought, man, that would be really cool. But it didn't seem like, here's what I'm super thankful for to my parents and so many others in my life, that nobody ever said, oh, Nikki, you can't do that. You can't fly in space. You can't be an astronaut. Nobody ever did that. I just kind of laid it on myself that, wow, that seems like something other special people get to do,
Right.
And even as I got older, I felt that way. And so very thankful for mentors in my life and people that encouraged me once I started questioning it. But man, I'll tell you, if I could go back in time, maybe I would have just been from day one, now that I know how awesome it is.
That is fantastic.
That's a great way to start. Is there one inflection point back in the day that you can remember that was sort of that, okay, that's it, I'm going for it?
So I studied aeronautical engineering in school because, when I was in high school, I didn't even really get ready to graduate. I really didn't even know if I was going to go to college. And I had no big plan, and I'm old. So back in that day, there wasn't this pressure like there is on kids now. Like the moment they enter college, they need to have a resume and know. And I don't know if I'd be sitting here with you if that had been what was required back then. But, I loved flying, wanting to know how things fly. So I studied aeronautical engineering, and I did that right up the road from the Kennedy Space Center. And I grew up in Florida where, things fly to space from.
Yes.
And, so I was excited about that in general. My uncle worked at the space agency over at Kennedy Space Center. And so I got a little insight to what was happening with the space shuttle program and that kind of thing. And while I was at college, I was like, oh my gosh, if you want to know how airplanes fly, why would you not want to know how rocket ships fly? And then really seriously, why would you not? And the shuttle program was getting up and running. And then I'll stop rambling. But long story short, when I graduated from college, I was very fortunate to get a job at NASA at the Kennedy Space Center as an engineer on the space shuttle program. We were getting back to flight after Challenger, and all this whole big group of young engineers came in. And it was during that time, probably while working on the shuttle and station projects, and I got to see astronauts coming through preparing for their flights.
Right.
I was helping make these vehicles, put them, get them ready for them to fly with this really awesome group of people. And I started thinking, seeing, I'm like, man, 99.9% of an astronaut's job, sadly to astronauts, is not flying in space. It's here on Earth, right?
Yes.
And then it's so true, and then best I could tell, the majority of it was a lot like what I was already doing as a NASA engineer. And so,
okay.
So I started thinking, well, maybe I could consider this. And that's when I reached out to a couple of people that I considered to be mentors, people who taught me lessons like this one. I'll show you my little guy that I've had on my desk ever since this has happened. So my friend Jay Honeycutt, who taught all of us young engineers to approach every problem with, the idea, first of all, that there is a solution to the problem, but also with the here's how we can, not why we can't approach to things.
Oh, I like that.
And all of these things that just started getting embedded in me and seeing what astronauts do, I'm like, maybe I should talk to them and see if this is something I should pursue. And, they did exactly, I think, what my spirit needed, which was just to be somebody to say, okay, Nicole, if you want to do this, you got to pick up the pen and fill out the application.
Right.
It's like they gave me permission to do the one thing in the whole process that I had
that you had to do.
Yeah, and it wasn't going to cost me anything. It wasn't going to hurt. I could still think that maybe they won't pick me and only other special people get to do this, but I at least was, putting myself out there. Yeah.
Yes.
And so thankful for that.
So many different small dots, so many different small pieces of the puzzle from the aeronautical engineering because you like the flying. And then your uncle gave you a little bit of a glimpse into what NASA happened, and you happen to go to college close. And there's a lot of little breadcrumbs along the way that led to this. That was cool.
Yeah. And I think that, I like that you mentioned that, that I liked flying. I think that's a big deal, and maybe it was better for me not to be in that position of from the time I saw humans walking on the moon that it was like life was going to be over unless I became an astronaut. I mean, honestly, I've met people who are so wrapped up in becoming an astronaut that they aren't maybe appreciating the awesomeness of what they're experiencing along the way. And I can tell you, having been a person sitting on the other side of the table now, for the selection process, we are looking for people that are absolutely excited about the work they're doing, that are motivated to pursue what they're curious about, right? They want to learn more about it. They're looking at the awe and wonder in the world around them, and they're pulling that into their lives and the way they create things, the way they explore just through what they're studying at school or hobbies that they have, or ultimately the jobs that they do. And then all of that feeds such a cool way into making somebody that you'd want to pick to be an astronaut, that you'd want to spend an extended period of time on it in a relatively confined space with, beyond just what they studied. And, it's pretty cool to see how that whole process goes down. And I think it goes back to what you guys just said. It's about that curiosity. It's about that wonder and really exploring that in a way that's meaningful to you. And then that's how you end up giving back the most to the world around you too.
Exactly. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's what, I'm sure you say all this to the students that you talk to. I say that when I talk to them as well. Just be curious and notice the world around you, explore. That's what makes everything exciting. Then everything else that you learn, you get, really interested in, and it kind of just moves along. But I'm really curious. So after you went through this whole journey, what was it like the very first time when you blasted off into space? Were you excited, nervous?
No, I wasn't excited at all. Right? I don't think you can really explain the level of excitement that's going on inside you. I mean, it's like human beings. We have to respond to all this, right? You have to respond to everything. I mean, just the emotional side of it, the physical side of it, everything. And once you're strapped into that seat to launch, it's like it's all, finally coming together. These years of training, the support from your family and friends, all of it is kind of just churning there.
Wow.
But I think it's an excitement for good, right? It's like adrenaline for good, And I don't remember being afraid for me, because I think me and my crewmates, we had trained as much as you humanly possibly can to take care of whatever can humanly possibly be taken care of, if something goes wrong too.
Not only a fascinating topic about launching rockets, but can you think of 3 more fascinating people that you wouldn't want to talk to them about their jobs even longer? Natalie, Dan, and Nicole, wow. What a great trio we just had, Jen.
Absolutely. And I mean, no, I can't think of anybody better than that. And we covered everything from how to build the rocket, to move it, to blast off in it. I mean, this is fantastic. So if you want to listen to the entire episode of each of these, make sure you go to solveitforkids.com, or you can catch us on Spotify or iTunes or any place that you listen to your podcast. And we hope you have tons of fun listening and learning about launching rockets.
Jen and Jeff are nearing the end of our break, and if you don't think we listen to our own episodes, think again, because we will be listening to some of our favorite episodes before we come back live next week. You'll hear us then on Solve It for Kids.